In the scorched frontier town of Red Hollow, a scarred blacksmith named Ethan Crow stunned the crowd by paying just 2 coins to free a captured tribal woman from a slave auction. The townspeople laughed, calling him a fool. But that night, his forge burned to ash. The woman, Ayla Naru, warned him he'd just bought himself a war. Now hunted by the same trafficking ring that destroyed her people, they're forced into the desert with nothing but distrust and a shared enemy. One man's guilt, one woman's vengeance, and a past that refuses to stay buried. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. The auction block stood in the center of Red Hollow, like a rotting tooth, wood bleached gray by sun and stained dark by use. Ethan Crow kept his head down as he walked past it, same as he did every morning on his way to the forge, same as he'd done for 3 years. He didn't look at the people chained there, didn't let his eyes linger on the faces. That was the deal he'd made with himself when he'd come to this place. Keep your head down, do your work, don't get involved. The past was a grave he'd dug deep, and he had no intention of digging it back up. But that morning, something made him stop. Maybe it was the silence. Red Hollow's auctions were usually loud, men shouting bids, captives pleading or cursing, the auctioneer's voice cracking like a whip over it all. But today, the square had gone quiet. Ethan turned. On the platform stood a woman, tribal by the markings on her skin, intricate lines that curved along her arms and disappeared beneath the torn remains of her clothing. Her hair was black and tangled, her face cut and bruised, but her eyes weren't broken. That's what stopped him. That's what made his hands, scarred and calloused from years at the anvil, curl into fists at his sides. Everyone else on that block looked defeated, hollow. But this woman stood like she was carved from stone, chin up, staring down the crowd with something that looked a lot like contempt. Going once, the auctioneer called, a wiry man named Dalton with a voice like gravel. Going twice. 2 coins, Ethan said. The crowd turned. Dalton squinted at him. You say something, Crow? 2 coins, Ethan repeated, louder this time. He stepped forward, pulling the coins from his pocket. They were old, worn smooth, the only pay he'd saved from the last month. For the woman. Laughter rippled through the square. Someone shouted, That all she's worth to you, blacksmith? Another voice. Hell, I wouldn't pay 2 coins for a lame horse. Dalton grinned, showing teeth like old fence posts. Well, now that's an insult to the merchandise. This here's prime goods, Crow. Naru tribe. Strong back, good teeth. 2 coins, Ethan said again. Take it or I walk. The auctioneer's grin faded. He looked at the woman, then at the crowd. No one else was bidding. The truth was, tribal captives were trouble. They fought, they ran, they didn't break easy. Most buyers wanted something simpler. Dalton spit into the dust. Fine, she's yours. Ethan handed over the coins and climbed onto the platform. Up close, the woman was taller than he'd expected, nearly his height. The cuts on her face were fresh, and there was a bruise spreading across her collarbone that made his jaw tighten. He unlocked the shackles at her wrists. She didn't move. You're free, he said quietly. Go. Her eyes, dark, unreadable, fixed on his face. When she spoke, her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it in days. You think 2 coins buys my freedom? I think 2 coins buys you a choice, Ethan said. What you do with it is up to you. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she turned and walked off the platform, moving through the crowd like a blade through water. People stepped aside, uneasy, as if her anger had a weight they could feel. Ethan watched her go. Then he headed back to the forge. He didn't expect to see her again. But the fire came at midnight. Ethan woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of wood cracking. He rolled out of his cot, already reaching for his boots, and saw the glow through the window, orange and hungry, eating through the front wall of the forge. He grabbed what he could, his hammer, a leather satchel, the old revolver he kept under the bed, and kicked open the back door. Heat chased him into the alley, and he stumbled into the cool night air, coughing, eyes streaming. By the time he turned around, the forge was gone. Flames climbed into the sky, and the heat was so intense he had to back away, shielding his face. A crowd gathered, people spilling out of homes and saloons, watching the blacksmith's livelihood burn. No one moved to help. No one brought water. Ethan stood there, soot-streaked and empty-handed, and felt the weight of it settle over him like an iron shroud. "Guess someone didn't like what you did today," a voice said behind him. He turned. It was Dalton, the auctioneer, leaning against a post with his arms crossed. His grin was back. "Who?" Ethan asked. "Who do you think?" Dalton shrugged. "You bought property that didn't belong to you, Crow. Garrick Hale don't take kindly to interference." The name hit him like a fist to the gut. Garrick Hale. Ethan's hands tightened around the hammer. "Hale's here?" "Not here, but his boys are." Dalton gestured lazily toward the crowd. "They're the ones running the trade now. You step on their toes, they step on your neck." He pushed off the post, still grinning. "Should have minded your business, blacksmith." Ethan didn't answer. He watched the flames consume the last of the roof, sparks spiraling into the black sky, and felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd thought he could bury the past. He'd been wrong. He found her at the edge of town, sitting on a low ridge overlooking the desert. The moon was high, casting everything in silver and shadow, and she sat with her knees drawn up, staring out at the endless expanse of sand and stone. Ethan approached slowly, boots crunching on the gravel. She didn't turn, but he knew she'd heard him. "They burned it," he said. "I know." "You know?" He stopped a few feet away, anger creeping into his voice. "Did you have something to do with it?" She finally looked at him. Her expression was flat, unreadable. "You think I burned your forge?" "I think I didn't have enemies until I bought you off that block." "You had enemies long before that," she said. "You just didn't know it yet." Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "What's that supposed to mean?" She stood, brushing dust from her pants. She was still wearing the torn clothing from the auction, but someone, maybe her, had tied a strip of cloth around one of the cuts on her arm. "My name is Ayla," she said. "Ayla Naru. My people lived in the canyon lands, 2 weeks' ride east of here. We didn't bother anyone. We kept to ourselves." Her voice was steady, but there was something sharp beneath it, like a blade wrapped in cloth. 3 months ago, men came. They killed the elders, burned our homes, took everyone they could chain. Women, children, didn't matter. Ethan said nothing. "The man leading them," Ayla continued, "was named Garrick Hale." There it was. The name again, dragging him back. "I don't know Hale," Ethan lied. Ayla's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "I don't—" "You went pale when the auctioneer said his name," she interrupted. "Your hand tightened on that hammer like you were about to swing it. So don't tell me you don't know him." Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. The desert stretched out before them, empty and vast, and for a moment he wished he could just walk into it and disappear. "I knew him," he admitted quietly. "A long time ago." "How long?" 5 years. Maybe 6. He sat down on the ridge, suddenly exhausted. "I rode with a crew back then. We did jobs, security, transport, sometimes enforcement. Hale was part of it. We all were." "What kind of jobs?" Ethan didn't answer right away. The memories were there, waiting, and he'd spent years trying to keep them locked down. "The kind you don't talk about," he said finally. Ayla sat down beside him, keeping a careful distance. "And now?" "Now I'm a blacksmith. Or I was." He glanced back toward Red Hollow, where a column of smoke still rose into the night. "Guess that's done." "Good," Ayla said. He looked at her, surprised. "You can't stay here," she continued. "Hale's men will come for you. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And when they do, they won't just burn your forge." "Why do you care?" She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw something other than anger there, something raw. "Because you're the first person in 3 months who didn't look at me like I was livestock," she said. "And because if you know Hale, you can help me find him." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not getting involved in this." "You already are." "I paid 2 coins. That's it." "That doesn't make me—" "It makes you a target," Ayla cut in. "Same as me. So you can sit here and pretend you're not involved, or you can face the truth. You just painted a mark on your back, and the only way forward is through." Ethan stared at her. Then he looked out at the desert again, at the endless dark stretching toward a horizon he couldn't see. She was right. He hated that she was right. "If I help you," he said slowly, "it's not for revenge. I'm not that person anymore." Then why? He thought about the woman on the auction block, about the way she'd stood there, unbroken, while the world tried to grind her down, about the way her eyes had looked when he'd unlocked the shackles. "Because someone should," he said. Ayla didn't smile, but something in her posture shifted, just a little. "Then we leave at first light," she said. Fuck it. They took what they could carry: Ethan's satchel, a canteen, a bedroll he'd salvaged from the ashes. Ayla had nothing but the clothes on her back and a shard of bone she'd sharpened into a knife. She showed it to him once, briefly, and he didn't ask where she'd gotten it. Red Hollow was still sleeping when they slipped out through the east gate, the sky just beginning to pale at the edges. No one stopped them. No one cared. The desert swallowed them whole. For the first 2 days, they barely spoke. Ethan led them along old trails he remembered from his years riding, paths that kept them off the main roads and away from prying eyes. Ayla followed, silent and watchful, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon. On the third day, the silence broke. "You said you rode with Hale," Ayla said. They were walking through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep and red on either side. "What happened?" Ethan kept his eyes on the trail. "We had a falling out." "Over what?" He didn't answer. "If we're doing this," Ayla pressed, "I need to know what I'm walking into." Ethan stopped, turned. The canyon walls seemed to close in around them, and the air was hot and still. "We took a job," he said. "Protecting a shipment. Hale said it was cargo, merchandise. He didn't say it was people." Ayla's expression didn't change, but he saw her hand move to the bone knife at her belt. "When I found out," Ethan continued, "I told him I was done. He didn't like that. Said I was soft. Said I didn't have the stomach for real work." He exhaled, a bitter sound. "We fought. I left. That was the last time I saw him." "And the people?" Ayla asked quietly. "The ones you were protecting?" Ethan looked at her. "I don't know. I left before the job finished." The words hung between them like smoke. "So you walked away," Ayla said. Her voice was flat, impossible to read. "Yeah. And you think that makes you better than him?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I think it makes me different." "Different," Ayla repeated. She shook her head, a sharp, humorless movement. "You knew what he was. You rode with him. You took his money. And when it got too dirty for you, you walked away and told yourself you were clean." "I didn't— You didn't stop him," Ayla interrupted. "You didn't fight him. You just left. And people like Hale don't stop because one man walks away. They keep going. They keep taking. They keep destroying." Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, and Ethan saw the rage beneath the surface, sharp and deep and older than the scars on her skin. "You're right," he said quietly. She blinked, caught off guard. "You're right," Ethan repeated. "I walked away. I told myself it wasn't my problem, and people suffered because of it." He met her eyes. "I can't undo that, but I can help you now, if you'll let me." For a long moment, Ayla just looked at him. Then she turned and started walking again. "Keep up," she said over her shoulder. They found the first body on the 5th day. It was lying half buried in the sand, twisted and bloated by the heat. Ethan recognized the markings, the same intricate lines that decorated Ayla's skin. She knelt beside it, silent, and Ethan stood back, giving her space. After a while, she stood and wiped her hands on her pants. Her face was stone. "One of yours?" Ethan asked. "My cousin," Ayla said. "Mika. She was 14. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. "I'm sorry." Ayla didn't respond. She just stared down at the body, and Ethan could see her jaw working, like she was chewing on words she couldn't say. Finally, she turned and walked away. They buried Mika in the shadow of a red rock outcropping, covering the grave with stones to keep the scavengers away. Ayla didn't speak during the burial, and Ethan didn't push her. When it was done, she sat on a nearby boulder, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. Ethan sat down a few feet away. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the temperature was starting to drop. "How many?" he asked quietly. How many what? How many people did Hale take from your tribe? Ayla was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant. 43. That's how many were chained and marched out of the canyon. I counted. She looked at him. I was one of them. Ethan's throat tightened. How did you escape? I didn't. Not at first. She looked down at her hands, at the scars around her wrists. They kept us in a camp. Hale's camp. We were there for 2 weeks before they started moving us to different buyers. I was in the group heading west. What happened? There was a storm, flash flood. The wagon we were in tipped and the chains broke. 3 of us got out. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she was reciting facts. The others were caught. I ran. For how long? 2 weeks, maybe more. I lost track. She looked at the horizon, at the darkening desert. I thought if I could just get far enough, I'd be safe. But then I got careless, let my guard down, and Hale's men found me. And brought you to Red Hollow. Ayla nodded. To the auction block, where you found me. Ethan exhaled slowly. The pieces were falling into place now, the picture becoming clearer, and he didn't like what he was seeing. The others, he said. The 43. Do you know where they are? Some of them were sold in Red Hollow. The rest... She shook her head. Hale has camps, holding pens. He keeps people there until he finds buyers. Could be anywhere. And your family? Ayla's expression hardened. My father's dead, killed in the raid. My brother, too. She paused. My mother, I don't know. She was in the group that got taken, but I haven't seen her since. Ethan looked at her, at the way she held herself, rigid, controlled, like if she let go for even a second, she'd shatter. We'll find her, he said. Ayla's eyes snapped to his. Don't. Don't what? Don't make promises you can't keep, she said sharply. I don't need hope. I need information. I need to know where Hale is, where his camps are, who's working for him. Hope doesn't do anything but get you killed. Ethan held her gaze. I wasn't making a promise. I was stating a fact. We're going to find Hale, and when we do, we're going to find out what happened to your people. That's not hope. That's the plan. For the first time since he'd met her, Ayla almost smiled. It was brief, barely there, but it softened the hard lines of her face. You're stubborn, she said. So are you. She stood, brushing sand from her pants. We should keep moving. There's a water source half a day east. We'll camp there tonight. Ethan nodded and followed her into the gathering dark. Bam! The water source turned out to be a narrow creek, barely more than a trickle, winding through a cluster of rocks. But it was clean and cold, and after 5 days in the desert, it felt like a gift. They filled the canteen, drank their fill, and set up camp in a sheltered spot where the rocks formed a natural windbreak. Ethan built a small fire, just enough for warmth, not enough to be seen from a distance, and they sat on opposite sides of it, passing strips of dried meat back and forth. Tell me about Hale, Ayla said after a while. Not the jobs. Him. What kind of man is he? Ethan chewed slowly, thinking. Smart, ruthless. He doesn't do anything without a reason, and he doesn't take risks unless the payoff's worth it. What's his weakness? Greed. He always wants more money, more control, more power. It's never enough. Ayla nodded slowly. And his men? Are they loyal? To his money, yeah, but not to him. If you pay them more, they'll turn. Good, Ayla said. That's useful. Ethan studied her across the fire. The flames cast shifting shadows on her face, and for a moment she looked younger, less like a warrior and more like someone who'd had everything taken from her. What about you? He asked. What was your life like before all this? Ayla's expression closed off. It doesn't matter. It does to me. She looked at him, eyes narrowed. Why? Because I need to know who I'm traveling with, Ethan said. And because you're not just a weapon, you're a person, and people have lives. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed, a long, tired sound. We lived in the Canyonlands, she said quietly. Small community. Maybe 70 people. We hunted. We fished. We traded with the settlements when we needed to. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. She poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the air. I had a role. I was a scout. I'd go out into the desert, map the trails, watch for threats. I was good at it. I believe that. She glanced at him, something unreadable in her eyes. My brother used to say I was too serious, that I needed to smile more, laugh more. But I liked being serious. I liked having a purpose. And now? Now my purpose is finding Hale, Ayla said, and making him pay for what he did. Ethan heard the steel in her voice, the cold certainty, and he knew better than to argue. We'll find him, he said again. This time, Ayla didn't tell him to stop. They reached the old trading post on the 7th day. It was a sagging structure of wood and adobe, half swallowed by sand, with a hand-painted sign that read, Clement's Goods in faded letters. A few horses were tied up outside, and smoke rose from a crooked chimney. Wait here, Ethan said. Ayla frowned. Why? Because if Hale's men are inside, they'll recognize you, but they won't know me. Not anymore. You're sure? No, Ethan admitted, but it's worth the risk. He pushed through the door before she could argue. The inside of the trading post was dim and cluttered, shelves stacked with canned goods, tools, ammunition. A few men sat at a table in the corner, playing cards, and a heavy-set man with a gray beard stood behind the counter, cleaning a rifle. Help you? The man asked without looking up. Need supplies, Ethan said, and information. Supplies I got. Information costs extra. Ethan put a coin on the counter. The man glanced at it, then at him. What kind of information? I'm looking for someone. Man named Garrick Hale. The men at the card table went quiet. The man behind the counter set down the rifle, slowly, and fixed Ethan with a hard stare. That's a dangerous name to throw around, friend. I'm not looking for trouble, Ethan said. Just need to know where he is. Why? Personal business. The man snorted. Personal business with Hale usually ends with someone dead. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You sure you want to go down that road? I'm sure. The man studied him for a long moment. Then he scooped up the coin and pocketed it. Last I heard, Hale's running operations out of a camp near Broken Ridge, 3 days north of here. But if you're planning to walk in there, you better be ready for a fight. He's got 20 men, maybe more, and they're not the forgiving type. Noted, Ethan said. Anything else? Yeah, don't come back here. The man picked up the rifle again. I don't need the kind of heat you're carrying. Ethan nodded and left. Outside, Ayla was waiting by the horses, arms crossed. Well? She asked. Broken Ridge, Ethan said. 3 days north. Her eyes gleamed. Then let's move. They rode hard, pushing through the heat and the dust, stopping only when the horses needed rest. The landscape shifted as they traveled north, fewer rocks, more scrub, the horizon broken by low mesas and distant mountains. On the second day, they spotted riders in the distance. Ethan pulled his horse to a stop, shading his eyes. There were 4 of them, moving fast, heading east. Hale's men? Ayla asked. Maybe, or just travelers. We should follow them. That's a bad idea. They might lead us to the camp. Ethan looked at her. Or they might lead us into an ambush. Ayla's jaw tightened. We're running out of time, Ethan. Every day we waste is another day those people are suffering. And rushing in without a plan gets us killed, Ethan shot back. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all. They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Ayla looked away. Fine. We do it your way. But if this goes wrong, it won't, Ethan said. He hoped he was right. Broken Ridge was a jagged line of cliffs rising out of the desert like broken teeth. The camp sat at the base, hidden in a narrow canyon, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Ethan and Ayla approached on foot, leaving the horses tied a mile back. They moved slowly, carefully, using the rocks for cover until they reached a vantage point overlooking the camp. It was bigger than Ethan had expected. Dozens of tents, a corral for horses, a central fire pit, and people, lots of them. Some were armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Others were captives, chained and huddled in groups, their faces hollow and resigned. Ayla's breath hitched. Do you see her? Ethan asked quietly. She scanned the camp, eyes moving over every face, and then she shook her head. No, but there are others, my people. Ethan studied the layout, counting guards, noting the positions. We can't take them head on. There are too many. Then we wait until dark, Ayla said. And we hit them when they're not expecting it. Ethan looked at her. This isn't just about freeing your people, is it? What do you mean? You want Hale, Ethan said. You want him to pay. And I get that. But if we go in there guns blazing, we're going to get people killed, including the ones we're trying to save. Ayla's eyes flashed. So what do you suggest? We wait, we watch, we find out where Hale is, and we come up with a real plan, not a suicide run. And how long do we wait? Ayla demanded. How many more people have to suffer while we sit here and do nothing? We're not doing nothing, Ethan said, his voice hardening. We're being smart. There's a difference. Ayla glared at him, and for a moment he thought she was going to argue. But then she looked back at the camp, at the captives huddled in the dirt, and something in her seemed to crack. Fine, she said quietly. We wait, but not for long. Ethan nodded. Not for long. They settled in to watch, the sun sinking low on the horizon, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. And as the shadows lengthened, Ethan felt the weight of it all pressing down on him, the past he couldn't escape, the future he couldn't predict, and the woman beside him who trusted him with more than he deserved. He just hoped he could see it through. The camp below settled into a rhythm as the sun disappeared. Guards changed shifts, fires were stoked, and the captives were herded into a large tent near the center. Ethan counted 3 armed men at the entrance, 2 more circling the perimeter every 20 minutes. There, Ayla whispered, pointing to a smaller tent set apart from the others. That's where they keep the weapons. See the guard? Ethan nodded. A single man sat outside, rifle across his lap, head nodding forward every few minutes before jerking back up. If we can get to that tent, Ayla continued, we can arm ourselves, then hit the guard posts, free the captives, and get shot before we make it 10 feet, Ethan finished. We need more than guns. We need a distraction. Like what? He studied the layout again, eyes moving over the corral, the supply wagons, the main fire. Then he saw it, a cluster of barrels stacked near the edge of camp, marked with faded lettering he couldn't quite read from this distance. Those barrels, he said. What do you think they are? Ayla squinted. Oil, maybe, or whiskey. Either way, they'll burn. She looked at him, understanding dawning. You want to start a fire? I want to start chaos, Ethan corrected. Fire just happens to be a good way to do it. And while they're busy putting it out, we move in. Exactly. Ayla was quiet for a moment, turning the plan over in her head. Then she nodded. It could work, but we'll need to move fast. Once that fire starts, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before they get organized. Then we don't waste the time. Ethan glanced at the sky. Full dark now, stars beginning to prick through. We go in 2 hours. That gives the camp time to settle, guards time to get tired. And us time to get closer. They moved down from the ridge, keeping low, using the shadows and the scrub for cover. The desert was cooler now, the heat of the day bleeding away into the night, and Ethan's breath came in steady, controlled measures. Beside him, Ayla moved like a ghost, silent, fluid, every step deliberate. They reached the edge of camp and crouched behind a cluster of rocks, close enough now to hear voices, the crackle of fire, the clank of chains. Ethan's hands tightened on the revolver. He'd told himself he was done with this, done with violence, done with blood. But looking at those captives, at the armed men standing over them like they were nothing more than cargo, he felt something old and familiar stir in his chest. You ready? Ayla asked. No, Ethan admitted, but let's do it anyway. She almost smiled. They split up. Ayla circled left, heading toward the barrels, while Ethan moved right, closer to the weapons tent. The plan was simple. Ayla would set the fire, Ethan would take out the guard and secure the weapons, and then they'd converge on the captive tent and get people out before the whole place came down around them. Simple. Not easy. Ethan reached the weapons tent and crouched in the shadow of a supply wagon, watching the guard. The man was older, graying at the temples, and his eyes kept drifting shut. Every few seconds, he'd jerk awake, glance around, then settle back into his drowsy state. Ethan waited. Patience was a weapon too, and he'd learned long ago that rushing got you killed. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then the fire started. It wasn't a gradual thing. One moment the camp was quiet, and the next, flames erupted from the barrel cluster with a roar that shook the air. Men shouted, scrambling, and the guard in front of Ethan jumped to his feet, rifle swinging toward the commotion. Ethan moved. He closed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed the rifle barrel, and yanked it down. The guard's finger tightened on the trigger, but Ethan twisted the weapon, driving the stock into the man's gut. Air rushed out in a wheeze, and Ethan followed with a sharp elbow to the temple. The guard dropped. Ethan caught him before he hit the ground, lowered him gently, and dragged him into the shadow of the tent. Then he pushed inside. Rifles lined one wall, handguns on a table, boxes of ammunition stacked in the corner. Ethan grabbed 2 rifles, a belt of cartridges, and a knife he found strapped to a wooden post. Outside, the shouting was getting louder, more frantic. He stepped back into the open and saw the fire had spread. The barrels had ignited a stack of crates nearby, and flames were climbing toward the tents. Men were running with buckets, others barking orders, and in the chaos, no one noticed Ethan. He moved toward the captive tent, keeping to the shadows. Ayla was already there, crouched by the entrance, her bone knife in one hand. The 3 guards who'd been posted were gone, pulled away by the fire. "About time," she muttered. Ethan handed her a rifle. "Let's move." They pushed into the tent. Inside, the air was thick and stifling, reeking of sweat and fear. Dozens of people sat huddled together, chained at the ankles, eyes wide and wary. Some were Naru, marked with the same intricate lines as Ayla. Others were from different tribes, different places, their clothing torn and dirty. A woman near the front, old, her hair streaked with white, looked up at Ayla and gasped. "Ayla?" Ayla's breath caught. "Mira?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet." Ayla knelt, working at the chains with the knife. "Where's my mother? Is she here?" Mira shook her head. "They moved her 2 weeks ago. Said she was too much trouble, kept fighting. They took her north." "North where?" "I don't know. They don't tell us anything." Ethan moved through the tent, using the knife to break chains, helping people to their feet. Some could barely stand, legs weak from days of captivity. Others moved with a desperate energy, eyes fixed on the exit. "We need to get them out," Ethan said. "Now." Ayla nodded, still working on Mira's chains. "Can you walk?" "I'll crawl if I have to," Mira said. The chain snapped and Ayla helped her up. "Stay close. We're getting you out of here." They led the captives toward the exit, but as Ethan pushed through the flap, he saw movement. 2 guards, returning from the fire, rifles raised. "Stop right there!" one shouted. Ethan didn't think. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the air, and the first guard went down, clutching his shoulder. The second guard swung his weapon toward Ethan, but Ayla was faster. She stepped out, rifle to her shoulder, and fired twice. The guard dropped. "Move!" Ethan shouted to the captives. "Go, now!" They poured out of the tent, stumbling into the chaos of the burning camp. Ethan and Ayla covered them, rifles sweeping the area, but more guards were coming now, drawn by the gunfire. "We can't hold them," Ayla shouted. "We don't have to." Ethan fired at a man rushing toward them, forcing him to dive for cover. "Just get them to the canyon mouth. I'll cover you." "Like hell you will." Ayla grabbed his arm. "We go together or not at all?" Ethan wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. He nodded, and they moved as a unit, backing toward the canyon entrance, firing when they had to, shouting at the captives to keep moving. The fire was spreading faster now, consuming tents, licking at the supply wagons. Smoke rolled across the camp in thick clouds, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Ethan's eyes burned, his throat raw, but he kept moving, kept firing, kept pushing forward. They reached the canyon mouth, and Ethan turned to count heads. 30, maybe 35 people. Not everyone had made it out. Some had been too weak, too slow. Others had been caught in the crossfire. The weight of it settled over him like a stone. "Keep moving," Ayla shouted, pulling him back. "We're not done yet." They ran. The canyon walls rose steep and dark on either side, the ground uneven and treacherous. Behind them, the camp was a roaring inferno, and the shouts of Hale's men echoed off the rocks. Ethan glanced back and saw riders, 3 of them, spurring their horses through the smoke, rifles in hand. "They're coming!" he shouted. Ayla looked, cursed, and grabbed Mira. "Can you run?" "I told you," Mira gasped. "I'll crawl if I have to." "Then run!" They picked up speed, the captives scattering into the canyon, using the rocks for cover. Ethan stopped, turned, and dropped to one knee, rifle braced. The riders were close now, close enough for him to see their faces. He fired. The lead rider jerked back, horse rearing, and the other two pulled up, seeking cover. Ethan fired again, the shot sparking off stone, and then he was up and running, boots pounding the dirt. He caught up to Ayla at a narrow bend in the canyon. She was standing with her back to the wall, rifle aimed at the entrance, breathing hard. "How many?" she asked. "2, maybe 3. They'll be careful now." "Good. Let them be careful." She looked at the captives, huddled in groups further down the canyon. "We need to split up. Get these people to safety." "Where?" "There's a settlement, half a day west. They'll take them in." "And us?" Ayla's jaw tightened. "We go back." Ethan stared at her. "Back to the camp?" "Hale wasn't there. I checked every face, every tent. He's somewhere else." "Ayla is My mother is out there," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "And Hale knows where. So yes, we go back. We find someone who can talk, and we make them tell us what we need to know." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was too dangerous, too reckless. But he saw the look in her eyes, the desperate, burning need, and he knew there was no talking her down. "Fine," he said. "But we do it smart, no charging in." Agreed. They left Mira and the others with directions to the settlement and a promise to follow soon. Then they doubled back, moving carefully through the canyon, listening for the sound of pursuit. The camp was still burning when they returned, flames lighting up the night sky. Most of Hale's men were focused on salvaging what they could, dragging crates and supplies away from the fire. The captive tent was gone, collapsed into ash and blackened canvas. Ethan and Ayla circled the perimeter, staying low, watching for an opportunity. "There," Ayla whispered, pointing to a man standing near the edge of camp. He was younger than the others, maybe early 20s, and he kept glancing nervously at the fire. "Think you'll talk?" Ethan asked. Only one way to find out. They waited until the man wandered away from the group, heading toward the corral to check on the horses. Ayla moved first, silent and fast, and by the time the man realized someone was behind him, it was too late. She grabbed him, one arm around his throat, the other pressing the bone knife to his side. "Don't scream," she hissed. "Don't move, just listen." The man froze, eyes wide. Ethan stepped out of the shadows, rifle leveled. "We're going to ask you some questions. You answer them, you walk away. You lie, you don't. Understand?" The man nodded frantically. "Good," Ayla said. "Where's Garrick Hale?" I don't know." Ayla pressed the knife harder, and the man yelped. "Wrong answer." "I'm serious," he gasped. "He's not here. He left 2 days ago." "Where did he go?" Ethan demanded. "North. He went north. There's another camp bigger than this one. That's where he does most of his business." "Where exactly?" 3 days' ride near the old railhead at Dust Creek. That's all I know, I swear." Ayla looked at Ethan. He nodded. "One more thing," Ayla said. "The captives you moved 2 weeks ago. Where did they go?" The man hesitated, and Ayla twisted the knife. He gasped. "The railhead. They're at the railhead. Hale's holding them until he can move them east." "How many?" "I don't know. 20, maybe 30. Ayla released him, and he stumbled forward, gasping for air. "Now get out of here, and if I see you again, I'll finish what I started." The man didn't need to be told twice. He ran. Ethan lowered the rifle, watching him disappear into the darkness. "You think he was telling the truth? About the railhead?" "Yeah. He was too scared to lie about that." Ayla slid the knife back into her belt. "About the numbers? Maybe. But it doesn't matter. If my mother's there, we're going." Ethan nodded slowly. 3 days north, that's a long ride. "Then we better get started." They left the camp behind, the flames still burning against the night sky, and headed back to where they'd left the horses. The desert stretched out before them, vast and empty, and Ethan felt the weight of what they'd just done settling over him. They'd freed some people. Not all, not enough. But it was a start. They rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Broken Ridge. The horses were tired, their breathing heavy, but they pushed on until the first light of dawn began to creep across the horizon. Ethan called a halt near a dry creek bed, and they dismounted, leading the horses down into the shelter of the rocks. Ayla unsaddled hers with quick, efficient movements, then sank down against a boulder, eyes closed. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." She opened her eyes, glaring at him. "What do you want me to say? That I'm exhausted? That I can't stop thinking about the people we left behind?" Her voice cracked. "I saw Mira. I saw others from my tribe, but my mother wasn't there, and every minute we waste is another minute she's in Hale's hands." Ethan sat down across from her. "We're not wasting time. We're regrouping, and we'll get to Dust Creek, I promise." "You keep making promises," Ayla said quietly. "Why?" "Because I mean them." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment the hard shell she carried seemed to crack. "Back there," she said, "in the camp. You could have run, could have left me to handle it alone. Why didn't you?" Ethan thought about it, about the woman on the auction block, about Mira's tears, about the faces of the people they'd freed. "Because this is the first thing I've done in years that actually matters," he said. Ayla held his gaze and something passed between them, an understanding, fragile and new. "Get some rest," Ethan said. "I'll take first watch." She nodded and closed her eyes. Ethan stood, rifle in hand, and climbed back up to the edge of the creek bed. The sun was rising now, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, and he watched the horizon, searching for movement. Nothing. For now, they were safe, but he knew it wouldn't last. They rested for a few hours, then pushed on. The landscape shifted as they traveled north. More rocks, fewer open stretches. The terrain growing rougher. By midday, they reached a narrow pass between two towering mesas, and Ethan slowed, eyes scanning the cliffs. "What is it?" Ayla asked. "Good place for an ambush," Ethan said. "Stay alert." They rode through this pass slowly, weapons ready, but nothing happened. The only sound was the wind whistling through the rocks and the steady clop of hooves on stone. When they emerged on the other side, Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Paranoid," Ayla muttered. "Alive," Ethan corrected. They made camp that night in the shadow of a red rock formation, building a small fire and sharing the last of their dried meat. Ayla sat with her back to the rock, staring into the flames, and Ethan could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I will. After you." She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're stubborn." "You said that before." "It's still true." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Ayla spoke, her voice quiet. "I keep thinking about what you said, about how this is the first thing that matters." She looked at him. "What were you doing before? Before Red Hollow?" Ethan poked at the fire with a stick, trying to forget. "Forget what?" "Everything," he exhaled. "The jobs, the people I hurt, the choices I made." He looked at her. "I thought if I kept my head down, worked an honest trade, maybe I could outrun it. But you can't outrun the past. It catches up eventually." "And now?" "Now I'm done running." Ayla nodded slowly. "I understand that." "Do you?" "My whole life I was taught to protect my people, to be strong, to be vigilant. And when Hale came, I failed. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't save them." Her voice was rough, raw. "So yeah, I understand. This isn't just about revenge. It's about making something right, even if it's just one thing." Ethan looked at her across the fire, and he saw the weight she carried, the guilt, the anger, the desperate need to fix what was broken. "We'll make it right," he said. "You keep saying that." "Because I believe it." Ayla held his gaze, and for the first time since they'd met, she didn't look away. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The next day brought them to the edge of a broad valley, and in the distance they could see the remnants of the old railhead, rusted tracks stretching into the desert, a cluster of buildings sagging under the weight of years. "That's it," Ayla said. "Dust Creek." Ethan studied the settlement through his rifle scope. There were people moving between the buildings, more than he'd expected. And horses. Lots of horses. "Hale's there," he said. "How do you know?" "Because that's his horse, the black one with the white blaze." Ethan lowered the scope. I'd recognize it anywhere. Ayla's expression hardened. Then we go in tonight. Not yet. We need to scout it first. See how many men he's got, where they're keeping the captives. And if we wait too long, he moves them again. And if we rush in blind, we get killed, Ethan countered. I know you want this, Ayla, but we have to be smart. She was quiet for a long moment, jaw clenched. Then she nodded. Fine, we scout. But tonight, we move. They spent the rest of the day watching the settlement, mapping the layout, counting men. Ethan saw at least 15 guards, maybe more, and a large barn near the center that looked like it was being used to hold captives. When the sun set, they moved in. The settlement was quiet. Most of the men gathered around a fire near the main building, passing a bottle and talking in low voices. Ethan and Ayla circled wide, keeping to the shadows, until they reached the barn. Ethan tested the door, locked. Can you pick it? Ayla whispered. Not quietly. She pulled out her knife. Then we make noise. Before Ethan could stop her, she jammed the blade into the lock and twisted. The mechanism gave with a sharp crack, and the door swung open. Inside, the barn was dark and musty, and the smell of unwashed bodies hit them like a wall. Ethan's eyes adjusted, and he saw them, rows of people, chained to posts, some lying down, others sitting with their heads bowed. Ayla moved through the barn, checking faces, and then she stopped. Mother. Ethan turned and saw her kneeling beside a woman, older, her hair streaked with gray, but with the same strong features as Ayla. The woman's eyes opened, and when she saw Ayla, they filled with tears. Ayla, she whispered. My girl. Ayla's hands shook as she worked at the chains. I'm here. I'm getting you out. You shouldn't have come. It's too dangerous. I don't care. The chain snapped, and Ayla helped her mother to her feet. We're leaving, now. Ethan moved to the other captives, breaking chains, helping people up. Some were too weak to stand, and he had to support them, guiding them toward the door. Go, he told Ayla. Get them out. I'll cover you. Ethan, go! She hesitated, then nodded. She led her mother and the others out into the night, and Ethan followed, rifle ready. But as they emerged from the barn, the guards by the fire looked up. For a single frozen moment, no one moved. Then someone shouted and the camp erupted. Ethan fired, the shot echoing across the valley, and the guards scattered. Ayla was already running, pulling her mother along, and the other captives followed, stumbling and desperate. Ethan backed toward them, firing again, forcing the guards to take cover. But there were too many, and they were closing in. Ayla, he shouted, get them to the horses. Not without you. Just go. A bullet whined past his head, and Ethan dropped to one knee, returning fire. He saw a man go down, then another, but more were coming, spilling out of the buildings, rifles raised. He was going to die here. And then Ayla was beside him, firing her own rifle, her face set in grim determination. I told you, she said. Together or not at all. Ethan wanted to argue, but there was no time. They fired together, covering the captives as they fled into the darkness, and when the last one was clear, they turned and ran. Bullets chased them, kicking up dust, sparking off rocks. Ethan's lungs burned, his legs ached, but he kept moving, kept running, Ayla at his side. They reached the horses and swung into the saddles, spurring them hard. Behind them, the guards were mounting up, giving chase, and Ethan knew they wouldn't stop, not until someone was dead. They rode hard through the night, the captives scattering in different directions to confuse the pursuit. Ethan and Ayla stayed together, pushing their horses to the limit, the sound of hooves pounding behind them. The chase lasted for hours, through canyons, across dry creek beds, over rocky ridges. Ethan's horse stumbled once, nearly throwing him, but he recovered and pushed on. Finally, as the sky began to lighten, the sounds of pursuit faded. Ethan risked a glance back. Nothing. I think we lost them, he said. Ayla didn't answer. She was slumped in the saddle, breathing hard, and Ethan saw blood on her sleeve. You're hit, he said, pulling his horse alongside hers. It's nothing. Let me see. She didn't argue. Ethan dismounted and helped her down, peeling back the torn fabric. The bullet had grazed her upper arm, cutting a deep furrow but missing the bone. You're lucky, he said, pulling a strip of cloth from his satchel and wrapping the wound. Doesn't feel lucky. You're alive, that's lucky enough. She looked at him, and despite the pain, she smiled. You're right, it is. They rested for a few minutes, then mounted up again and rode on. The sun climbed higher, the heat returning, and Ethan felt the exhaustion pulling at him like a weight. But they'd done it. They'd freed Ayla's mother. They'd struck another blow against Hale, and somewhere ahead, the road stretched on, leading them toward whatever came next. They found shelter in a shallow cave carved into the side of a mesa, barely wide enough for the three of them and the horses. Ayla's mother, Kensa, she'd told them her name was, sat with her back against the rock wall, eyes closed, breathing shallow. The years hadn't been kind to her, and the weeks in Hale's camp had stripped away whatever strength she'd had left. Ethan built a small fire near the entrance, just enough to ward off the night chill, and checked Ayla's wound again. The bleeding had stopped, but the skin around it was angry and swollen. You need to rest, he said. I'm fine. You're not fine, you got shot. It's a graze. It's an infection waiting to happen, Ethan countered. He dug through his satchel and pulled out a small tin of salve. Hold still. Ayla didn't argue this time. She let him clean the wound and apply the salve, her jaw tight against the sting. When he was done, he wrapped it again with fresh cloth and sat back. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't mention it. Kensa opened her eyes, watching them. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. You're the one who bought her freedom. Ethan glanced at Ayla, then nodded. I am. 2 coins, Kensa said. That's what I heard. 2 coins for my daughter's life. It wasn't about the money. No, Kensa agreed. I don't suppose it was. She looked at Ayla. You trust him? Ayla met her mother's eyes. I do. Kensa nodded slowly, as if that settled something. Then she closed her eyes again, exhaustion pulling her under. Ethan added another stick to the fire and settled against the cave wall. Ayla sat across from him, knees drawn up, staring into the flames. She looks like you, Ethan said. Ayla's lips twitched. She'd say I look like her. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly between them. Then Ayla spoke, her voice low. When they took us, she fought. Harder than anyone. They hit her, chained her, dragged her through the dirt, and she still fought. Ayla's hands curled into fists. I thought they'd kill her, but Hale said she was worth more alive. Said defiance fetched a higher price in certain markets. Ethan's stomach turned. I'm sorry. Don't be. She survived. That's more than most can say. Ayla looked at him. But she's not strong enough to keep running. We need to find somewhere safe, somewhere Hale can't reach. There's a settlement, Ethan said. 2 days west. I've been there before. Good people. They don't ask questions. Will they take her in? They will if I ask them to. Ayla studied him. You have friends there? Something like that. Ethan poked at the fire. I helped them out a few years back. Fixed their well, repaired some tools. They owe me. And after we get her there? Ethan looked at her, and he knew what she was asking. We finish this. Hale? Yeah, Hale. Ayla nodded, and something fierce and cold settled in her eyes. He has to pay for what he's done, not just to my people, to all of them. He will, Ethan said, but we need a plan. We can't just walk into his camp again and expect to walk out. I know. Do you? Because back at Dust Creek, you almost got yourself killed. I got my mother out, Ayla shot back. That's what mattered. And if you died doing it, what would that have accomplished? Ethan's voice hardened. Your mother would still be a captive, and I'd be burying you in the desert. Ayla glared at him. I didn't ask you to come. No, you didn't, but I'm here anyway, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you throw your life away for revenge. It's not revenge, Ayla said sharply. It's justice. There's a difference? Yes. She leaned forward, eyes blazing. Revenge is personal. It's selfish. Justice is for everyone. For Mira, for the people we freed, for the ones still out there. For my mother. Her voice cracked. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it because someone has to. Ethan held her gaze, and he saw the truth in her words. She wasn't lying. This wasn't about her pain, her loss. It was about stopping Hale before he destroyed anyone else. All right, he said quietly. Then we do it together. And we do it smart. Ayla's shoulders relaxed just slightly. Agreed. They left at first light, moving slowly to accommodate Kensa. She rode behind Ayla, arms wrapped around her daughter's waist, and Ethan could see the effort it took for her to stay upright. But she didn't complain, didn't ask them to stop. The settlement was called Greywater, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a natural spring. It wasn't much, maybe 20 families, the trading post, a small stable, but it was quiet, and the people there kept to themselves. Ethan led them to a house on the edge of town, a modest structure with a sagging porch and a well-tended garden. He dismounted and knocked on the door. A woman answered, middle-aged, with graying hair and sharp eyes. When she saw Ethan, her expression shifted from suspicion to surprise. "Crow? That you?" "It's me, Marla." She looked past him to Ayla and Kenza. "You bring trouble?" "Not the kind you're thinking," Ethan said. "I need a favor." Marla crossed her arms. "What kind of favor?" "The woman on the horse. She needs a place to stay, somewhere safe, just for a while." Marla studied Kensa, taking in the bruises, the hollow look in her eyes. Then she sighed. "Bring her in." They helped Kensa inside and settled her on a cot near the fire. Marla brought water, clean cloth, and a bowl of stew that smelled like heaven. Kensa ate slowly, hands shaking, and Marla watched with a mixture of pity and understanding. "She's been through hell," Marla said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She has. And you're planning to go back into it." It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. Marla shook her head. "You always did have a talent for finding trouble." "It finds me," Ethan said. "I just deal with it." "Well, she can stay as long as she needs. But you," Marla pointed at him, "you be careful. I didn't patch you up 3 years ago just to have you get yourself killed now." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'll do my best." They stayed in Greywater for 2 days, giving Kensa time to rest and regain some strength. Ayla barely left her mother's side, and Ethan used the time to resupply. Ammunition, food, fresh water. On the second evening, he found Ayla sitting on the porch, staring out at the desert. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, and the air was cooling. He sat down beside her. "How's she doing?" "Better. Marla's been good to her." Ayla paused. "She wants me to stay." "Do you want to?" "No." Ayla's voice was firm. "I can't. Not yet." "She's your mother. She needs you." "She needs me alive," Ayla corrected, "and the only way to keep her safe is to make sure Hale can't come after her, or anyone else." Ethan nodded. He understood, maybe better than anyone. "There's something you should know," Ayla said. "My mother told me about the other camps. Hale's got at least 3 more spread across the territory. Each one holds 20, maybe 30 people, and he's planning to move them soon, east, to the rail lines." "How does she know?" "She overheard the guards talking. They didn't think she understood English." Ayla's jaw tightened. "If we don't stop him now, those people are gone. Sold off, scattered to places we'll never find them." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then we need to hit him before he moves them." "How? We barely made it out of Dust Creek alive, and that was just one camp." "We need leverage," Ethan said. "Something that forces Hale to come to us." "Like what?" Ethan thought for a moment, turning the problem over in his mind. Then an idea began to form. Hale's operation runs on money. He's got buyers, investors, people funding the whole thing. If we can cut off that funding, he loses his power, Ayla finished. "But how do we do that?" "Hale keeps records, ledgers, names, numbers, transactions. He has to, or he can't keep track of who owes him what." Ethan looked at her. "If we can get our hands on those ledgers, we can expose him, ruin him." Ayla's eyes widened. "And where would he keep something like that?" "Somewhere secure. Somewhere he can access, but no one else can." Ethan paused. "I'm betting he's got a main camp, a headquarters. That's where the ledgers would be." "And you know where that is?" "No, but I know someone who might." Ayla frowned. "Who?" "A man named Cole. He used to run with Hale's crew, same as me. Last I heard, he was working as a scout out of a town called Black Iron." "You trust him?" "Hell no," Ethan said. "But he owes me. And if there's one thing Cole values, it's staying alive. He'll talk if I ask the right way. Ayla studied him. And if he doesn't? Then we improvise. They left Greywater the next morning, Kensa standing on Marla's porch, watching them go. Ayla turned back once, raising a hand, and Kensa returned the gesture. Then they were gone, swallowed by the desert. Black Iron was 3 days' ride south, a rough town built around a defunct mining operation. The place had a reputation for harboring drifters, outlaws, and anyone else who didn't want to be found. It was the kind of town where questions got you a knife in the ribs, perfect for someone like Cole. They arrived at dusk, the streets dusty and crowded with men spilling out of saloons and gambling halls. Ethan kept his head down, eyes scanning the faces, looking for someone he recognized. "Where do we start?" Ayla asked. "The Red Lady," Ethan said, nodding toward a saloon at the end of the street. That's where Cole used to drink. They tied the horses outside and pushed through the swinging doors. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. Men crowded around tables, shouting over each other, and a piano player in the corner banged out a tune that was more noise than music. Ethan moved through the crowd, Ayla at his side, and scanned the room. Then he saw him. Cole sat at a table in the back, cards in hand, a bottle at his elbow. He was older than Ethan remembered, his face more lined, but the eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, always looking for an angle. Ethan walked over and sat down across from him. Cole looked up, and for a moment his expression didn't change. Then recognition dawned, and he grinned. "Well, I'll be damned, Ethan Crow. Thought you were dead." "Not yet." Cole's grin widened. "What brings you to this fine establishment? Come to reminisce about the old days?" "I need information." "Of course you do." Cole glanced at Ayla, then back at Ethan. "And who's your friend?" "Someone who's not your concern," Ethan said. "Where's Hale's main camp?" The grin faded. Cole set down his cards and leaned back, eyes narrowing. "That's a dangerous question, Crow. I'm not asking for fun." "No, I don't suppose you are." Cole picked up his bottle, took a long drink, and set it down. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm going to burn it to the ground." Cole laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You and what army?" "Just me," Ethan said. "And her." Cole looked at Ayla again, really looked at her this time, and his expression shifted. "You're Naru." Ayla's hand moved to the knife at her belt. So Hale's been hunting your people for months. Wiped out half the canyon tribes, sold the rest." Cole's eyes gleamed. "You're here for revenge." "I'm here for justice," Ayla said coldly. "Same thing, sweetheart." Ayla leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Call me sweetheart again, and I'll cut your tongue out." Cole blinked, then laughed again. "I like her. She's got fire." "Cole," Ethan said, his voice hard. "The camp, where is it?" Cole studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You really plan to go up against Hale?" "Yes." "Then you're crazier than I thought." Cole leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But I'll tell you this much. Hale's got a place up near the Broken Tooth Canyon. Old fort left over from the territorial wars. That's where he runs everything. Guards, supplies, captives, and the ledgers." "How many men?" 30, maybe 40, all armed, all loyal. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Any way in?" "Only one. Through the front gate." Cole grinned. "Unless you feel like climbing a cliff in the dark." "That might be exactly what we do." Cole shook his head. "You're going to get yourself killed, Crow." "But hey, it's your funeral." He paused. "Why are you really doing this? You walked away from Hale years ago. You could have stayed gone." Ethan looked at Ayla, then back at Cole. "Because walking away didn't fix anything. It just made me a coward." Cole's grin faded. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He stood, tossed a coin on the table, and walked out. Ethan watched him go, then turned to Ayla. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready since the day they took my people," Ayla said. "Let's finish it." They left Black Iron that night, riding hard toward Broken Tooth Canyon. The landscape grew rougher, more unforgiving, and by the time they reached the canyon's edge, the sun was beginning to rise. Ethan dismounted and crept to the edge, looking down. The fort sat at the base of the canyon, a squat, stone structure with high walls and a single gate. Guards patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung over their shoulders, and smoke rose from chimneys inside. "There," Ayla whispered, pointing to the eastern wall. "See that ledge? We could climb down, get over the wall." "That's a 60-foot drop," Ethan said. "One slip and we're dead." "You got a better idea?" He didn't. They waited until nightfall, then began the descent. The rock was loose and treacherous, and more than once, Ethan felt his boots slip, his fingers scrambling for purchase. Beside him, Ayla moved with the grace of someone who'd spent her life in the canyons, and he tried to match her pace. They reached the ledge and crouched there, catching their breath. Below the fort was quiet. Most of the guards gathered around fires near the gate. "We go in quiet," Ethan whispered. "Find the ledgers, get out. No heroics." Ayla nodded. They dropped over the wall, landing in a crouch, and moved through the shadows. The fort's interior was a maze of buildings and courtyards, and Ethan relied on instinct, following the largest structure toward the center. They found the door unlocked and slipped inside. The room was an office: desk, chairs, shelves lined with books and papers. And there, on the desk, was a leather-bound ledger. Ethan grabbed it, flipping through the pages. Names, dates, amounts, everything. "This is it," he whispered. "Good," Ayla said. "Now let's go." But as they turned to leave, the door swung open and a man stepped inside. Garrick Hale. He was tall, lean, with a face like chiseled granite and eyes that were cold and flat. He looked at Ethan, then at Ayla, and smiled. "Well, well," he said. "Ethan Crow. I was wondering when you'd show up." Ethan's hand moved to his revolver, but Hale was faster. He pulled his own gun, leveling it at Ethan's chest. "Don't," Hale said. "I'd hate to kill you before we had a chance to talk." Ayla's hand went to her knife, but Hale shook his head. "You too, sweetheart. Drop it." Ayla's eyes burned, but she let the knife fall. Hale kicked it aside, then gestured to the ledger in Ethan's hand. "Looking for something?" "Just the truth," Ethan said. "The truth?" Hale laughed. "The truth is you're a hypocrite. You rode with me, Ethan. You took the money, you did the jobs, and now you want to play the hero." "I'm not a hero," Ethan said. "I'm just trying to stop you." "Stop me?" Hale's smile widened. "You can't stop me. I've built an empire. I've got buyers in 6 states, contracts with rail companies, partnerships with men who make more in a day than you'll see in a lifetime. You think burning a few camps is going to change that? Maybe not," Ethan said. "But it's a start." Hale's smile faded. "You always were stubborn." He looked at Ayla. "And you, the Nauru girl. I remember your people. Proud, defiant, useless." He stepped closer. "Your mother screamed when I had her dragged out of the canyon. Did she tell you that?" Ayla's jaw clenched, and Ethan saw her hands curl into fists. "Leave her alone," Ethan said. "Or what?" Hale's gun didn't waver. "You'll shoot me. You're not fast enough. You never were." "Maybe not," Ethan said. "But she is." Hale frowned, and in that split second of confusion, Ayla moved. She lunged, knocking the gun aside, and Hale stumbled back. Ethan drew his revolver and fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough. Hale dove for cover, and Ayla grabbed her knife, rushing toward him. They collided in a tangle of limbs, Ayla's knife flashing, Hale's fist swinging. Ethan tried to get a clear shot, but they were moving too fast, too close together. Then Hale threw Ayla off, and she hit the wall hard, gasping for air. Hale raised his gun, aiming at her, and Ethan didn't think. He fired. The bullet caught Hale in the shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped the gun, clutching the wound, and Ethan stepped forward, revolver trained on him. "It's over," Ethan said. Hale looked up at him, blood seeping through his fingers, and smiled. "You think this is over? I've got men everywhere. They'll hunt you down. They'll kill you." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but you won't be around to see it." Ayla stood, knife in hand, and walked toward Hale. Her face was a mask of cold fury, and Ethan saw the years of pain, of loss, of grief, all converging in this one moment. She raised the knife, and then she stopped. Hale looked at her, eyes wide. "What are you waiting for? Do it." Ayla's hand shook. The knife gleamed in the firelight, and Ethan could see the war raging inside her, the need for vengeance, the pull of justice, the weight of everything she'd lost. "Do it!" Hale shouted. Ayla lowered the knife. "No," she said quietly. Hale stared at her. What? I'm not giving you that, Ayla said. You don't get to turn me into you. She stepped back, and Ethan saw the relief in her eyes, the release of something dark and heavy. Then gunfire erupted outside and the door burst open. 3 of Hale's men rushed in, rifles raised. Ethan fired, dropping one. Ayla threw her knife, and it buried itself in another man's throat. But the third got a shot off, and Ethan felt the bullet graze his side, hot and searing. He fired again, and the man went down. Silence. Ethan looked at Hale, still slumped against the wall, bleeding out. The man's eyes were glazing over, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Let's go, Ayla said, grabbing the ledger. They ran. The fort was chaos now, guards shouting, gunfire echoing off the walls. Ethan and Ayla fought their way through, dodging bullets, returning fire, until they reached the wall. They climbed, hands slipping on the stone, bullets whining past them. Ethan felt blood soaking through his shirt, his vision blurring, but he kept moving. They reached the top and dropped over, hitting the ground hard. Ethan stumbled, and Ayla caught him. Come on, she said. We're almost there. They ran into the canyon, into the darkness, and behind them, the fort burned. They didn't stop running until the canyon walls closed in around them and the sounds of pursuit faded to nothing. Ethan's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed against a rock face, breathing hard, his hand pressed to the wound in his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, warm and sticky. Ayla dropped beside him, the ledger clutched to her chest. How bad is it? Bad enough, Ethan managed. He lifted his hand and they both looked at the gash. The bullet had torn through flesh just above his hip, deep, but not fatal. Not yet, anyway. We need to stop the bleeding, Ayla said. She tore a strip from her shirt and pressed it against the wound. Ethan hissed through his teeth. Gentle, he muttered. You want gentle, go to a doctor. But her hands were careful as she wrapped the makeshift bandage, tying it tight. That'll hold for now, but we need to get somewhere safe. You're losing too much blood. Ethan leaned his head back against the stone, eyes closed. The horses. Where'd we leave them? A mile back, maybe less. Ayla looked at the canyon walls rising steep and dark around them. Can you walk? I don't have much choice. She helped him to his feet and he bit down on a groan as pain shot through his side. They moved slowly through the canyon, Ayla supporting him, the ledger tucked under her arm. The night was cold now, the temperature dropping fast, and Ethan's teeth started to chatter. Stay with me, Ayla said. We're almost there. I'm not going anywhere. Good, because I didn't come this far just to watch you die in a ditch. Despite the pain, Ethan almost smiled. They found the horses where they'd left them, tied to a scrub tree at the canyon's edge. Ethan hauled himself into the saddle with Ayla's help, and she mounted her own horse, still holding the ledger. Where to? She asked. Ethan thought for a moment, trying to focus through the haze of pain. There's an old line shack, 2 hours north. Used to be a waypoint for cattle drives. It'll have shelter, maybe some supplies. Can you make it 2 hours? I'll make it. He didn't know if that was true, but he wasn't about to tell her otherwise. They rode through the darkness, the horses picking their way carefully over the rocky terrain. Ethan swayed in the saddle, his vision swimming, and more than once he felt himself slipping. But each time Ayla's voice cut through the fog, sharp and insistent. Stay awake, Ethan. Don't you dare pass out on me. I'm awake. You better be. The line shack appeared like a ghost out of the darkness, a sagging structure of weathered wood with half its roof missing and the door hanging crooked on its hinges. But it was shelter, and right now, that was all that mattered. Ayla helped Ethan down from his horse and half-carried him inside. The interior was bare except for a few broken crates and a rusted stove in the corner. She lowered him to the floor, propping him against the wall, and went back outside for the saddlebags. When she returned, she had water, the remains of their food, and a small bundle of cloth that might have once been bandages. She knelt beside him and started unwrapping the makeshift dressing. Ethan looked down at the wound and immediately wished he hadn't. The flesh was torn and ragged, blood still oozing despite the pressure she'd applied. This needs stitches, Ayla said. You know how to do that? I've sewn leather. Can't be that different. It's very different. Well, unless you've got a better idea, this is what we're doing. She pulled out her knife, held it over the small fire she'd started, and waited for the blade to heat. Then she threaded a piece of thin cord through the eye of a needle she'd found in the saddlebag. Ethan watched her, and despite everything, he felt a strange sense of calm. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She looked at him, and her eyes were fierce. "You saved my mother. You helped free my people. You stood with me when you could have walked away." Her voice softened. "I'm not losing you now." Ethan held her gaze, and something passed between them, something unspoken but understood. "All right," he said. "Do it." She worked quickly, her hand steady despite the dim light. Each pull of the thread sent fire through Ethan's side, and he gritted his teeth, refusing to make a sound. When she was done, she tied off the thread and sat back, wiping sweat from her forehead. "There. That should hold." Ethan looked down at the uneven line of stitches. "You ever think about becoming a doctor?" "Not even once." He laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at the wound. "Remind me not to do that." Isla handed him the water canteen, and he drank deeply, the cool liquid cutting through the fog in his head. She sat beside him, back against the wall, and opened the ledger. "Let's see what we risked our lives for," she said. The pages were filled with names, numbers, dates, buyers and sellers, routes and shipments, payments and debts. It was a map of Hale's entire operation, laid out in meticulous detail. Ayla's finger traced down one page, then another. "There are so many. Hundreds of people. Maybe more." "And now we have proof," Ethan said. "Proof of who bought them, who sold them, who profited." "What do we do with it?" "We take it to someone who can use it. A marshal, a territorial judge, someone with the authority to shut this down." Ayla looked at him. "You think they'll care? Most of these buyers are probably rich men, powerful men. They'll bury this before it sees the light of day." "Maybe," Ethan admitted, "but we have to try. Otherwise, what was the point of any of this?" Ayla was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ledger. Then she closed it and set it aside. "There's something else in here. At the back." She flipped to the last few pages, and Ethan leaned closer. The handwriting changed here, became more hurried, less neat. And there, near the bottom, was a list of names. Ayla's breath caught. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "These are Naru names, my people." She ran her finger down the list, and her hand started to shake. "Mika, Terran, Joran, they're all here. Are they? Some are marked as sold, others—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "Others are marked as deceased." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. Ayla kept reading, her eyes moving faster now, scanning each name, and then she stopped, her finger hovering over one entry. "Kensa Naru," she read aloud. "Status, detained. Location, Fort Broken Tooth." She looked at Ethan, tears streaming down her face. "That's my mother. We were right. She was there." "And now she's safe," Ethan said gently. "You got her out." "But the others—" Ayla's voice was raw. "So many others didn't make it." Ethan reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. "You can't save everyone, but you saved the ones you could. That counts for something." Isla wiped her eyes, and when she looked at him again, there was steel beneath the grief. "We're going to make this right. All of it." "We will," Ethan said. "I promise." They slept in shifts that night, taking turns keeping watch. Ethan's sleep was fitful, plagued by fever dreams and the dull throb of pain in his side. When he woke, the sun was streaming through the gaps in the roof, and Ayla was sitting by the door, the ledger open in her lap. "How long was I out?" he asked. "A few hours." "You need more rest." "I'll rest when we're done." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his side, and he fell back with a grunt. Ayla was at his side in an instant. "Don't move. You'll tear the stitches." "I'm fine. You're bleeding again." She pulled back the bandage and swore under her breath. "The wound's infected. I can see it." Ethan looked down and saw the angry red streaks spreading from the gash. "How bad?" "Bad. We need medicine. Real medicine, not just water and thread." "There's a town," Ethan said, his mind working through the haze. "Prescott Ridge. Half a day's ride east. They'll have a doctor." Can you ride? I don't have a choice. Ayla helped him to his feet, and this time the world tilted dangerously. He grabbed onto her shoulder, steadying himself, and she looked at him with worry etched deep in her face. Ethan, if you can't make it, I'll make it, he said. Let's go. The ride to Prescott Ridge was a blur. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, only dimly aware of Ayla's voice urging him to stay awake, the rhythm of the horse beneath him, the sun beating down. At some point, he slumped forward, and Ayla had to reach over and steady him in the saddle. Don't you die on me, she said, her voice fierce. You hear me? Don't you dare! He wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come. When they finally reached Prescott Ridge, Ayla practically dragged him off the horse and into the first building she saw, a small clinic with a hand-painted sign that read, Dr. Cowboy, physician. An older man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from his desk as they stumbled in. What in the... He's been shot, Ayla said. The wound's infected. He needs help. Now. Dr. Calloway didn't waste time asking questions. He cleared a table, helped Ayla lift Ethan onto it, and started cutting away the bloodied bandage. Ethan felt the man's hands probing the wound, heard him muttering under his breath, and then there was a sharp, burning sensation as something was poured over the gash. Ethan's vision went white, and he heard himself cry out. Hold him down, Dr. Calloway said. Ayla pressed her hands on Ethan's shoulders, and he felt the table beneath him, solid and real. The pain was everything now, consuming him, and he wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything to make it stop. And then, slowly, it began to fade. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the room was dim. A single lamp burned on the table beside him, casting long shadows on the walls. He tried to sit up, but his body felt like it was made of lead. Easy, a voice said. He turned his head and saw Ayla sitting in a chair beside the table. She looked exhausted, her face drawn, dark circles under her eyes. How long? He asked, his voice a rasp. 2 days, Ayla said. You had a fever. Dr. Calloway said it was touch and go for a while. But I'm still here. Yeah, you're still here. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You scared the hell out of me, Ethan. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again. He managed a weak smile. I'll try. Dr. Calloway entered the room, carrying a tray with bandages and a bottle of something that smelled sharp and medicinal. Ah, you're awake. Good. I was starting to think I'd have to explain to your friend here why I couldn't save you. He's tougher than he looks, Ayla said. Apparently. Dr. Calloway set down the tray and began unwrapping the bandage. The wound was still ugly, but the red streaks were gone, and the flesh around it looked healthier. The infection's clearing up. Another few days and you should be able to move around, but no riding, no heavy lifting. Understand? Understood, Ethan said. I mean it. You tear those stitches and you'll be right back where you started. Ethan nodded and Dr. Calloway left the room, muttering about stubborn patience. Ayla stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street. I've been thinking about what we do next. The ledger. Yeah, we need to get it to someone who can use it. Someone who won't just bury it. She turned to face him. There's a federal marshal in Silverton, about a week's ride north. I've heard he's honest. One of the few. You trust him? I don't trust anyone, Ayla said. But he's our best shot. Ethan nodded slowly. Then that's where we go. As soon as I can ride. Ethan, you heard the doctor. You need rest. And while I'm resting, Hale's men are regrouping. They're going to come after us, Ayla. You know that. Let them come. We beat them once. Barely. Ethan pushed himself up on his elbows, ignoring the protest from his side. We got lucky. Next time we might not. Ayla crossed her arms. So what are you saying? I'm saying we finish this. We get the ledger to the marshal, we make sure Hale's operation gets shut down, and then we disappear. For good. And my people? The ones still out there? The ledger has their locations. The marshal can send men to free them. Ethan met her eyes. But you can't save them all yourself, Ayla. You'll just get yourself killed trying. She looked away, jaw tight. I know. I feel like I'm abandoning them. You're not. You're giving them the best chance they've got. Ayla was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. All right, we do it your way. But the second you're able to ride, we leave. No delays. Deal. 3 days later, Ethan was back on his feet, moving gingerly but moving nonetheless. Dr. Calloway had wanted him to stay longer, but Ethan insisted, and eventually the doctor relented, grumbling about patients who didn't know what was good for them. Isla had used the time to resupply fresh ammunition, food, water, and a new horse to replace the one that had gone lame during their escape from Broken Tooth. She'd also spent time reading through the ledger, memorizing names and locations, preparing for what came next. They left Prescott Ridge at dawn, riding north toward Silverton. The land was changing now, the desert giving way to rolling hills and patches of forest. The air was cooler, the sky a deeper blue, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could breathe. You ever think about what comes after? Ayla asked as they rode. After what? After we hand over the ledger. After this is done. Ethan thought about it. He'd spent so long focused on the immediate, the next fight, the next mile, the next breath, that he hadn't let himself think beyond it. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I'll find another town, another forge. Start over. And if people recognize you, then I keep moving. Ayla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You could come with me. Ethan looked at her, surprised. Come with you where? My people, the ones we freed. They're scattered now, but they'll come back together eventually. Rebuild, and they'll need help. She glanced at him. You're good with your hands. You could teach them. Help them build something new. Ethan felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. You want me to join your tribe? I'm saying you'd be welcome, Ayla said. If you wanted. He thought about it. About a life that wasn't defined by running or hiding. A life where he could actually contribute something, build something that mattered. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. They rode in comfortable silence after that, the miles passing beneath the horses' hooves. And for the first time since Red Hollow, Ethan let himself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. Silverton was a bustling town built around a silver mine, with wide streets and sturdy buildings that spoke of prosperity. The federal marshal's office was near the center, a brick structure with bars on the windows and a flag flying overhead. Ethan and Ayla tied their horses outside and stepped into the office. A deputy sat behind a desk, young and clean-shaven, and he looked up as they entered. Help you? He asked. We need to see the marshal, Ethan said. It's urgent. The deputy's eyes flicked to the guns at their belts, then back to their faces. Marshal Garrett's out on a call. Should be back this afternoon. We'll wait, Ayla said. The deputy hesitated, then nodded. Suit yourselves. They sat on a bench near the window, the ledger wrapped in oilcloth and hidden in Ayla's saddlebag. The hours dragged, and Ethan found himself watching the street, looking for anything out of place. Old habits. Finally, the door opened and a man walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick mustache and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a marshal's star pinned to his vest, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that came from years of hard work. Marshal Garrett, the deputy said, standing, these folks have been waiting for you. Garrett looked at Ethan and Ayla, his expression unreadable. What can I do for you? Ethan stood. We have information about a trafficking operation run by a man named Garrick Hale. Garrett's eyes narrowed. I'm listening. Ayla pulled the ledger from the saddlebag and set it on the desk. This has everything. Names, locations, transactions, proof of what he's been doing. Garrett opened the ledger and started reading. His expression didn't change, but Ethan saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands gripped the pages. After a long moment, he looked up. Where did you get this? We took it from Hale's camp, Ethan said, at Broken Tooth Canyon. And Hale? Dead, Ayla said. Or close enough. Garrett studied them, and Ethan could see the wheels turning in the marshal's head, deciding whether to believe them, whether to act on the information. This is serious, Garrett said finally. If even half of what's in here is true, we're talking about a federal case. Multiple arrests. It'll take time. We don't have time, Ayla said. There are still people out there, captives. They need help now. Garrett nodded slowly. I'll send deputies to the locations listed here. We'll do what we can. He looked at Ethan. But I'm going to need statements from both of you. Everything you saw, everything you know. We'll give you whatever you need, Ethan said. Good. Garrett closed the ledger. And I'm going to need you to stay in town for a few days, just in case we have follow-up questions. Ethan glanced at Ayla. She nodded. We'll stay, Ethan said. Garrett extended a hand and Ethan shook it. You did a good thing here. Whatever else happens, you should know that. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. They left the marshal's office and walked back to the horses. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the town was settling into the quiet rhythm of evening. Do you think he'll do it? Ayla asked. Really go after the people in that ledger? I think he'll try, Ethan said. And right now, that's the best we can hope for. Ayla looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Not a small smile or a bitter one, but something real and genuine. We did it, she said. Yeah, we did. They found a small boarding house at the edge of town and rented 2 rooms. Ethan's wound was still tender, and the long ride had taken its toll, but he felt lighter somehow, like a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. That night, he sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the stars come out, and Ayla sat beside him. You think your mother's safe? He asked. I hope so. Marla said she'd look after her, and Greywater's a long way from Hale's territory. You should go see her, once this is settled. I will. Ayla paused. What about you? You really going to think about my offer? Ethan looked at her. I already have. And? I think I'd like that. Helping your people rebuild. Being part of something. He smiled faintly. It's been a long time since I was part of something. Ayla's eyes softened. Then it's settled. When this is over, you come with me. When this is over, Ethan agreed. They sat in silence after that, the night settling around them, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something close to peace. The days in Silverton stretched into a week, then 2. Marshal Garrett kept his word. Deputies rode out to the locations listed in the ledger, and one by one they returned with freed captives. Men, women, children who'd been held in camps scattered across the territory. The town's small jail filled with Hale's men, and the marshal's office became a hub of activity, telegrams flying to federal offices in Santa Fe and beyond. Ethan watched it unfold from a distance, giving his statement when asked but otherwise staying out of the way. His wound was healing, the stitches dissolving, the angry red fading to pink. Dr. Calloway and Prescott Ridge had done good work, and Ethan found himself grateful for the old man's stubbornness. Ayla spent her days helping with the freed captives, translating for those who didn't speak English, offering comfort to those who'd lost everything. Ethan saw her sitting with a young Nauru girl one afternoon, braiding the child's hair, and something in his chest tightened. She was good at this, at healing, at helping people put the pieces back together. One evening, Marshal Garrett found them at the boarding house. He climbed the steps to the porch where they sat and removed his hat. Got some news, he said. Ethan straightened. Good or bad? Bit of both. Garrett sat down on the railing, the wood creaking under his weight. We've arrested 17 men so far. Most of them are singing like canaries, giving up names, routes, buyers. The federal prosecutor says we've got enough to bring charges against at least 30 more people. Some of them are big names. Railroad men, territorial officials, even a banker out of Denver. That's the good news? Ayla asked. That's the start of it. Garrett pulled a folded telegram from his pocket and handed it to Ethan. This came in this morning from the territorial governor's office. Ethan unfolded the telegram and read. The words were formal, bureaucratic, but the message was clear. The trafficking operation had been dismantled, the captives freed, and those responsible would face justice. There was even a line thanking concerned citizens for their assistance. Concerned citizens, Ethan read aloud. That's one way to put it. Garrett smiled faintly. They're not going to put your names in the paper. Too many questions about how you got that ledger, but between you and me, you did more than half the lawmen in this territory combined. And the bad news? Ayla asked. Garrett's smile faded. Hale's not dead. Ethan's blood went cold. What? His men found him at Broken Tooth, patched him up, got him out before the place burned completely. Last anyone saw, he was heading east, probably to the rail lines. So he's still out there, Ayla said, her voice flat. For now. But he's wounded, broke, and every lawman in 3 territories has his description. He won't get far. Ethan looked at Ayla. Her face was stone, but he saw the flicker of something in her eyes. Disappointment, anger, maybe even fear. You think he'll come after us? Ethan asked. I think he's too smart for that, Garrett said. He knows we've got the ledger. He knows his operation's finished. Coming after you would just get him killed faster. He stood, replacing his hat. But I'd keep your eyes open just in case. After Garrett left, Ayla stood and walked to the edge of the porch, gripping the railing. Ethan joined her. I thought it was over, she said quietly. It is. The operation's shut down. The people are free. That's what we set out to do. But he's still alive. Yeah, he is. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. And maybe that's how it has to be. You had a chance to kill him, and you didn't. You made a choice. I made a mistake. No, Ethan said firmly. You made the right call. You didn't let him turn you into something you're not. He turned her to face him. Hale's running now. He's broken. And whether he dies in a jail cell or on the run, he's finished. You did that. Ayla's eyes searched his face. You really believe that? I do. She exhaled slowly, and some of the tension left her shoulders. I just wanted it to be clean, finished. Nothing's ever clean, Ethan said, but it's enough. 2 days later, a rider came into town, a Naru scout Ayla recognized. He brought news that the survivors from the canyon tribes were gathering at a place called Whispering Pines, a forested valley 3 days' ride west. They were rebuilding, planting crops, constructing shelters, and they were asking for Ayla. They want you to come home, the scout said. Ayla looked at Ethan. What about you? I told you I'd think about your offer, Ethan said. I've thought about it, and if they'll have me, I'd like to come. The scout nodded. The blacksmith who freed Ayla Naru is welcome among the people. So they left Silverton, riding west into country that grew greener with each mile. The desert gave way to grasslands, then rolling hills dotted with juniper and pine. The air smelled different here, cleaner, fresher, like rain and earth. Whispering Pines sat in a valley carved by a clear running river, the water cold and fast over smooth stones. Shelters were scattered along the banks, some already complete, others still being built. People moved between them. Naru mostly, but Ethan saw others too, survivors from different tribes, different places, all working together. When they rode in, people stopped and stared. Then someone shouted Ayla's name, and suddenly she was surrounded, hands reaching for her, voices calling out. Ethan hung back, watching, and he saw the way her face transformed, the hard edges softening, the walls coming down. Kensa appeared from one of the shelters, moving slowly but steadily, and when she saw Ayla, she stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ayla dismounted and ran to her mother, and they held each other, both of them crying. Ethan looked away, giving them privacy. He dismounted and led his horse to the river to drink. The water was cold and clear, and he knelt beside it, splashing some on his face. You're the blacksmith, a voice said. He turned and saw an older man, Naru, by the markings on his skin, watching him. The man's face was weathered, his hair streaked with gray, but his eyes were sharp. I am, Ethan said. Ayla speaks highly of you, says you helped her save many of our people. We helped each other. The man studied him for a long moment. You are welcome here, Ethan Crow. But I will tell you this. Our people have been broken. We are trying to put ourselves back together, and that is hard work. If you stay, you will work. You will build, and you will earn your place among us. I wouldn't expect anything else, Ethan said. The man nodded. Good. My name is Dakota. I speak for the council. If you need anything, you come to me. I will. Dakota walked away, and Ethan stood watching the activity around him. This was going to be his life now, not running, not hiding, but building something. The thought was strange, almost foreign, but it didn't feel wrong. Ayla found him later, as the sun was setting and the valley filled with the soft golden light of dusk. She sat down beside him on the riverbank. My mother wants to meet you properly, she said. Thank you for what you did. She doesn't need to thank me. She does. And so do I. Ayla looked at him. I never said it before, but I'm saying it now. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. He met her eyes, and he saw the sincerity there, the gratitude. You would have done it without me. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to. They sat in silence for a while, watching the river flow. Then Ayla spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? At the auction block in Red Hollow? Ethan thought about it, about the woman standing there, unbroken despite everything, about the choice he'd made, 2 coins that had changed both their lives. I think I would have regretted it, he said, for the rest of my life. And now? Now I'm here, and that's enough. Ayla smiled. Yeah, it is. The weeks turned into months. Ethan set up a forge near the river using stones and scrap metal salvaged from an old mining camp. It wasn't much, but it worked. He made tools, hammers, plows, axes, and taught some of the younger Naru how to work the metal. They were quick learners, and soon the forge became a gathering place, the sound of hammering and the smell of hot iron filling the valley. Ayla worked alongside her people, helping to plant fields, construct shelters, organize the community. She and Ethan fell into a rhythm, working through the day and sitting by the fire at night, talking about nothing and everything. One evening, as winter began to creep into the valley, Kensa joined them by the fire. She'd regained some of her strength, though she still moved carefully, and her hair had gone fully gray. I wanted to give you something, she said to Ethan. She held out her hand, and in her palm were 2 coins, old, worn smooth, exactly like the ones Ethan had used at the auction. He stared at them. Where did you get these? Ayla told me the story, about how you bought her freedom with 2 coins. Kensa smiled faintly. These are from my husband. He carried them always, said they brought him luck. He's gone now, but I think he would want you to have them. Ethan hesitated, then took the coins. They were warm from her hand, and they felt heavier than they should. I can't. You can, Kensa interrupted. You gave my daughter her life back. You gave me mine. This is a small thing. Ethan closed his hand around the coins. Thank you. Kensa nodded and stood. Now, I'm going to sleep. You two should do the same. Tomorrow's planning day, and we'll need all the hands we can get. After she left, Ayla looked at Ethan. She likes you. Yeah? She said you remind her of my father. Stubborn, hard-working, doesn't know when to quit. Ethan smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. The next spring, the valley was transformed. Fields of corn and beans stretched along the river, and new shelters, more permanent now, with stone foundations and solid roofs, dotted the hillsides. The population had grown too, as word spread that Whispering Pines was a safe place, and more survivors trickled in. Ethan's forge had expanded, and he now had 3 apprentices, all of them Naru, all of them eager to learn. He taught them not just how to shape metal, but how to see the potential in a piece of iron, how to turn something broken into something useful. One afternoon, as he was working on a new plow blade, Ayla came to the forge. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. You look happy, she said. Ethan glanced up, then back at the metal. I am. Good. You deserve it. He set down the hammer and wiped his hands on his apron. What about you? You happy? Ayla thought about it. I don't know if I'd call it happy. Not yet, but I'm content. I'm building something. That's enough for now. It's more than enough. She pushed off the doorframe and walked over to him. There's something I need to tell you. What? The council's been talking about making you an official member of the community. It's not just about living here, it's about belonging, being part of the tribe. Ethan's chest tightened. What does that mean? It means you'd have a voice in decisions, a say in what we build, where we go. It means you'd be one of us. And you want that? I do, Ayla said. But only if you do. Ethan looked around the forge, at the tools hanging on the walls, at the apprentices working outside. He thought about the life he'd built here, the people he'd come to know, the purpose he'd found. Yeah, he said, I want that. Ayla's face broke into a wide smile. Then it settled. The council meets tomorrow. We'll make it official. That night, Ethan sat by the river, the 2 coins Kensa had given him in his hand. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from Red Hollow to Broken Tooth, from the desert to the mountains, from running to rebuilding. He thought about the woman on the auction block, the one who'd refused to be broken. And he thought about the choice he'd made, the 2 coins he'd paid, and how that single moment had changed everything. You thinking deep thoughts? Ayla's voice broke through his reverie. He looked up and saw her standing there, silhouetted against the firelight from the camp. "Just reflecting," he said. She sat down beside him. "On what?" "On how far we've come, how much has changed." Ayla looked at the river, at the way the moonlight danced on the water. "Do you regret any of it?" "No," Ethan said without hesitation. "Not a single moment." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They're what got us here." Ayla nodded slowly. "I used to think that strength meant never breaking, never showing weakness. But I was wrong. Real strength is breaking and then putting yourself back together, over and over, as many times as it takes." Ethan looked at her, and he saw the truth of her words reflected in her eyes. She'd been broken, by hail, by loss, by grief, and she'd put herself back together. Not perfectly, but honestly. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met," he said. "So are you." They sat in silence after that, the river flowing beside them, the valley settling into the quiet rhythm of night. And Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. 5 years passed. Whispering Pines grew into a thriving community. The fields yielded strong harvests, the shelters became homes, and the forge became the heart of the settlement, always busy, always producing. Ethan trained a dozen apprentices, and some of them went on to start their own forges in neighboring valleys, spreading the skills he'd taught them. Isla became a leader among her people, not through title, but through respect. She organized trade with nearby settlements, mediated disputes, and spoke for the community in dealings with outsiders. She never forgot what had been lost, but she focused on what could be built. Kensa lived to see her grandchildren, Ayla's daughter and son, grow strong and healthy. She passed quietly one winter night, surrounded by family, and the community mourned her as one of their own. They buried her on the hillside overlooking the valley, and Ayla planted a tree there, a sapling that would grow tall and strong, just like her mother had been. Ethan and Ayla never married in the traditional sense, but they built a life together. They shared a home, raised children, and worked side by side to make Whispering Pines a place where people could live without fear. It wasn't always easy. There were bad harvests, harsh winters, conflicts that needed resolving, but they faced it all together. One evening, as the sun set over the valley, Ethan stood outside the forge, watching the smoke rise from the chimneys scattered across the hillside. Ayla came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I was thinking about Red Hollow," Ethan said, "about that day at the auction block. You paid 2 coins for me. Best investment I ever made." Ayla laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "You know what's funny? I've been carrying those coins ever since my mother gave them to you. I was going to give them back." She pulled them from her pocket and held them out. They were still worn, still smooth, and they caught the last light of the sun. "Why now?" Ethan asked. "Because you don't need them anymore. You bought my freedom once, but I've been free for years now. These belong to you, a reminder of where we started." Ethan took the coins and looked at them. They were just metal, just currency, but they represented something more. A choice made, a life changed, a future built. "No," he said, closing her hand around them. "They belong to you. They always have. I didn't buy your freedom, Ayla. I just gave you a chance to take it back. And you did. These should remind you of that." Ayla's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You're impossible, you know that?" "So I've been told." She pocketed the coins again and leaned against him, and they stood there together, watching the valley settle into dusk. The forge behind them had gone quiet, the fires banked for the night. The sounds of children playing drifted up from the homes below, and somewhere, someone was singing. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently?" Ayla asked. "If Hale had won? If we hadn't made it out?" "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. "But then I look around, and I see this, and I realize that all the pain, all the struggle, it led to something good, something real. Do you think it was worth it?" Ethan thought about the scars on his body, the nightmares that still came sometimes, the people they hadn't been able to save. Then he thought about the forge, the children, the community that had become his family. "Yeah," he said, "it was worth it." Ayla nodded, and they stood there as the stars began to appear, one by one, filling the sky above whispering pines. Years later, when Ethan's hair had gone gray and his hands had grown stiff from decades at the forge, he would sit with his grandchildren and tell them stories. He told them about the desert, about a woman on an auction block who refused to break, about a journey that started with 2 coins and ended with a home. He didn't tell them about the violence, the fear, the moments when he thought they wouldn't make it. Those memories he kept to himself, locked away in the places where old pain lived. Instead, he focused on the lessons, about courage, about standing up when it mattered, about how even broken people could build something beautiful. And when his grandchildren asked if the stories were true, he would smile and say, "Every word," because they were. Not in the way that history books recorded truth, but in the way that mattered. The truth of choices made, of lives changed, of people who refused to give up even when the world tried to grind them down. Ethan Crow had spent the first half of his life running from his past. He spent the second half building a future. And in the end, he learned that redemption wasn't about erasing what you'd done wrong. It was about choosing every single day to do something right. Isla taught him that. The community taught him that. And the 2 coins, still carried, still cherished, reminded him that sometimes the smallest gesture could change everything. On the day Ethan finally passed, surrounded by family and the home he'd built with his own hands, Ayla sat beside him, holding his hand. She was older now too, her hair silver, her face lined with years of sun and laughter and tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping that day, for 2 coins, for everything." Ethan squeezed her hand, his grip weak but steady. "Thank you for being worth stopping for." She smiled through her tears, and he closed his eyes, and the last thing he felt was her hand in his, and the certainty that he'd lived a life that mattered. They buried him on the hillside next to Kensa, and Ayla planted another tree, an oak, strong and enduring. And every spring, when the valley turned green and the river ran high with snowmelt, the people of Whispering Pines would gather there and remember the blacksmith who'd helped them rebuild, who taught them that broken things could be made whole again. The 2 coins were never spent. Ayla kept them until her own death, and then they were passed down through the generations, each one carrying the story of how 2 people, flawed, scarred, imperfect, had chosen to stand together against the darkness. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered, that even in the harshest desert, even in the deepest night, 2 people could find each other. And together, they could build something that would outlast them both.